November 2022, Moscow, Idaho. A college town so peaceful that people rarely felt the need to lock their doors. Inside the house at 1122 King Road, 4 young students, Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan, were living the prime of their lives. Beautiful, popular, vibrant. They believed their world was absolutely safe. But they were dead wrong. In the early hours of the 13th, as the snow began to fall, a masked shadow silently slipped through the sliding glass door on the second floor. No gunshots, no explosions, just the cold steel of a military-grade K-bar knife. In less than 20 minutes, the party house turned into a slaughterhouse. 4 lives extinguished in their sleep. Blood soaked through 2 floors in absolute, deadly silence. This case shattered the world because of who was holding the knife. He wasn't a career criminal. He was Bryan Kohberger, a Ph.D. student in criminology. A man who used his academic brilliance to engineer the perfect crime, challenging the very legal system he was studying to master. But does the perfect crime actually exist? Why were 4 butchered, while 2 roommates downstairs slept through the nightmare unharmed? Why did it take 8 hours to call the police? And what was the fatal amateur mistake that took down this arrogant genius? Welcome to Extreme Fear. Today's file, the Idaho 4. To truly grasp this tragedy, we have to look at Moscow, Idaho, a quiet college town where the murder rate was effectively 0. The stage was set at 1122 King Road. Students knew it as the party house. It sat backed up against a dark, dense tree line, and it was built with massive sliding glass doors. That open design made it a fatal trap. It turned the home into a transparent fishbowl. Inside, the victims lived their lives, carefree and happy, never suspecting that every move they made was being watched, recorded by a pair of cold, dead eyes, staring out from the darkness of the woods. This case centers on the senseless execution of 4 promising students: Kaylee, Madison, Xana, and Ethan. The weapon of choice? A military-grade K-bar knife, an instrument designed for maximum lethality. But what makes this case a lingering nightmare isn't just the brutality. It is the paradox of the killer. Bryan Kohberger, a Ph.D. student in criminology, a man who spent his life studying how to think like a detective, only to commit the most amateur mistake imaginable. He left the knife sheath behind, right there, on the bed next to the victims. That single object, and a microscopic trace of DNA left on the metal snap, was his undoing. It shattered his delusion of a perfect crime after a month-long cross-country manhunt. However, the biggest question still remains. The murders took place around 4 a.m., but police weren't called until 12 p.m. the next day. Why? What happened during those 8 hours of terrifying silence? Let's find the answer. The predator had been hunting for a long time. Cell phone tower data later revealed a terrifying truth. Bryan Kohberger had stalked the area around the house at least 12 times late at night in the months prior. He had memorized their schedule. He knew when they slept. 4 a.m., November 13th. A white Hyundai Elantra circled the house 3 times, like a ghost looking for an entry. Then it stopped. Mask on, medical gloves on, gripping the K-bar knife. He stepped out into the cold. The second-floor sliding glass door was unlocked. He slithered inside. He went to the third floor first, taking the lives of Kaylee and Madison while they slept. Then, he descended to the second floor. Xana was still awake. She had just received a DoorDash delivery. She fought back, desperately. But both she and her boyfriend Ethan fell to the cold blade. But the most haunting detail lies with the surviving roommate, Dylan. Hearing crying, Dylan cracked her door open. She froze in terror. She saw a figure clad in black, wearing a mask, with bushy eyebrows, walk right past her, toward the back exit. Did he not see her? Or did he choose to spare her? Paralyzed by a state of frozen fright, she locked her door and hid in silence. For 8 agonizing hours. It wasn't until 12 p.m. the next day that the call was finally made to 911. Bryan Kohberger believed he had committed the perfect crime. He turned off his phone. He wore gloves. He left no fingerprints. But arrogance was his downfall. At the crime scene, right next to Madison's body, police found something that didn't belong. The leather sheath of the K-bar knife. He had forgotten it in the heat of the moment. And on the tiny metal snap of that sheath, forensic technology found touch DNA. Microscopic skin cells. Just like that, the mask of the genius criminology student began to crack. The suspect's identity shocked the nation. Bryan Kohberger, 28 years old, a Ph.D. student at Washington State University, living just a 15-minute drive from the murder scene. But behind the prestigious degree was a broken, fractured soul. He was bullied severely for obesity in his youth. He underwent extreme weight loss. He spiraled into heroin addiction. And after getting clean, he replaced drugs with an obsession for crime. He was a classic loner, socially awkward, desperate for validation, yet harboring a deep, seething jealousy toward happy, popular young people like the victims. Police didn't arrest him immediately. They played the long game. They secretly tracked his white Elantra as he drove cross-country with his father, thousands of miles back to Pennsylvania for the holidays. The FBI was watching every stop. In his hometown, under the cover of darkness, detectives raided his parents' trash cans. The DNA from the trash was a perfect familial match to the DNA on the knife sheath. December 30, 2022. Before dawn. A SWAT team shattered the windows and stormed the house. Bryan was pinned to the floor in the kitchen, wearing shorts and a t-shirt. His face remained completely emotionless, and the first thing he asked police wasn't, "Why am I here?" or, "I didn't do it." Instead, he asked a chilling question. Was anyone else arrested? After being extradited to Idaho in 2023, the legal war stretched on for nearly 3 agonizing years. Prosecutors were relentless. They demanded the death penalty for this barbaric crime. But Bryan's defense team launched a barrage of delay tactics. They demanded the trial be moved out of Moscow, claiming the jury pool was biased. They attacked the legality of the genetic genealogy evidence. And through it all, sitting in the courtroom, Bryan maintained a face of stone, cold, emotionless. The entire chess match revolved around a single object, the K-bar knife sheath. The prosecution called the DNA on the snap the signature of death. They argued the odds of it belonging to anyone else were 1 in a quadrillion. combined with the white Hyundai Elantra data matching the timeline, they painted a portrait of a cold-blooded hunter who planned meticulously, but fell due to one tiny slip-up. But the defense fought back. They clung to the theory of transfer DNA, arguing that DNA can easily move from place to place, and that it didn't prove Bryan ever held the knife. And they drilled deep into a massive weakness in the state's case. Why was there no blood found in his car or his apartment? How could he butcher 4 people and clean up so perfectly that not even an atom of blood remained? Despite these sharp arguments, the weight of the circumstantial evidence was too heavy. Bryan didn't dare risk a trial that could end with a lethal injection. And here lies the most twisted part of the American justice system: the plea bargain. Imagine a man who slaughtered 4 people getting to negotiate with the law, trading a confession for his own life. Bryan knew the rules of this game. He used his knowledge of the law not to prove his innocence, but to squeeze through the narrowest crack to survival. Idaho wanted to avoid a trial that would cost millions of dollars and last for years. So, they made the deal. For the families, it was a release from the torture of seeing the killer's face in court every day. But it was also empty. Justice was served, but it felt hollow. The man who stole 4 bright futures gets to keep breathing, even if it is inside a cage. When the sentence was read, the world split in 2. Half let out a sigh of relief. The 3-year legal nightmare was finally over. The people of Moscow could try to heal. But the other half was furious. Social media exploded with rage. They called life in prison a luxury gift for a monster. They wanted an eye for an eye. And for the victims' families, even though they agreed to the deal, their eyes remain empty. Kaylee's father said it best, in a quote that breaks the heart. He gets to live. He gets to read books. He gets to eat. My daughter is just ash. That is a wound that no verdict can ever heal. Bryan Kohberger begins his eternal sentence at the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. Due to the high profile of his crime and the hatred from other inmates, he is held in protective custody. That means solitary confinement, 23 hours a day, alone in a concrete box. And here lies the ultimate irony. He was a Ph.D. student. He dreamed of becoming a leading expert in criminology. Now, he has achieved that dream in the worst way possible. He is no longer the researcher. He has become the specimen, a lab rat for other psychologists and students to analyze and dissect. Inside the prison, he still receives piles of letters. Fan mail from people suffering from hybristophilia, a twisted attraction to killers. To his narcissistic ego, perhaps he views this as a victory, a distorted form of fame. He managed to carve his name into criminal history, even if the price is watching the sky through a window the size of a hand, until the day he dies. Late 2023. The house at 1122 King Road was leveled to the ground. It was destroyed to stop the morbid pilgrims from coming to check in. The physical memory has been erased, but the digital scar remains. This case birthed the worst wave of TikTok detectives in history. Before Bryan was arrested, the online mob brutally accused the victim's ex-boyfriends and innocent friends. These people became secondary victims. They bear permanent psychological scars, inflicted by strangers who will never offer an apology. There is one specific detail that sends a cold shiver down the spine of anyone who hears it. Cell phone data revealed that around 9 a.m. the next morning, 5 hours after the murders took place, Bryan Kohberger returned to the scene. He parked his car nearby and just stared at the house. At that moment, the police had not yet been called. Inside the walls lay 4 brutalized bodies, but outside, everything was disturbingly peaceful. Was he sitting there, savoring the deadly silence? Or was he wondering, why aren't there any sirens yet? It was the morbid curiosity of a predator, returning to admire his work. But the most haunting part of all is Dylan's statement. She cracked her bedroom door open. She saw a figure clad in black, wearing a mask covering his nose and mouth, revealing only a pair of bushy eyebrows. He walked right past her, heading toward the sliding glass door. Why? Why didn't he kill her? Was he exhausted from the slaughter? Or did he simply not see her in the shadows? Dylan stood there, paralyzed in a state of frozen fright. She locked her door, and she hid in silence. That split second, when death walked right past her shoulder, will remain a nightmare that never ends for this young girl. To truly understand Bryan Kohberger, we must stop looking at him as a common street thug. We have to see him for what he really is, an intellectual with a deeply twisted mind. 7 months before the murders, Bryan left a digital footprint that now looks like a confession. He posted a research survey on Reddit, specifically targeting ex-criminals. He didn't ask about their childhoods. He asked about the kill. He asked them to describe their thoughts and emotions while they were committing their crimes. How did you approach your target? How did you prepare? What were you feeling as you left the scene? Criminal psychologists now believe that the Idaho massacre was not an explosion of sudden rage. For Bryan, this was his bloody thesis project. He wanted to take the cold theories from his textbooks and bring them to terrifying life. He wanted to know what it really felt like to extinguish a human soul, to satisfy the morbid curiosity of a criminology student. He is a living paradox, a man rigorously trained to hunt monsters, who ultimately chose to become one himself. Criminal profilers believe this wasn't a sudden burst of rage. For Bryan's arrogant ego, this was a practical exercise, a bloody graduation thesis designed to test the theories he read in books. He wanted to cross the line, to stop being an observer and become the executioner, to satisfy a morbid curiosity about the mechanics of life and death. But the deeper motive lies in the hollow void inside him. Bryan spoke of suffering from visual snow syndrome. He saw the world through a constant layer of static, like a broken TV screen. He described his existence as a video game, totally detached from reality, numb, emotionless, no regret. His past was a desperate scream, just to feel something. From a bullied, obese child to an obsession with extreme weight loss. He chased the high of heroin, then replaced the needle with academic textbooks. According to psychologists, this brutal act of murder was the ultimate stimulant. He needed a massive shock. He needed the godlike power to decide who lives and who dies. Just to feel alive inside his empty, soulless shell. Finally, there was the social envy. Bryan was the classic loner, socially awkward, always rejected. The house at 1122 King Road was a symbol of everything he never had: beauty, popularity, friendship, and endless parties. He hated them, simply because they shone so brightly. He didn't kill them for personal revenge. He killed them to destroy the symbol of happiness he could never touch. It was the revenge of darkness against the light. So why did a criminology expert leave behind the rookie mistake, like the knife sheath? The answer is intellectual arrogance. Bryan believed he was smarter than the system. He thought he could control every variable, but the messy, visceral reality of murder is far different from a textbook. Adrenaline and panic created tunnel vision, making him blind to the sheath he left behind. And the fact that he returned to the scene, that he ignored the witness Dylan, that wasn't carelessness. That was a God complex. Here is the transcreated script for the final conclusion. The mask of sanity and the digital warning. This is a powerful, haunting ending that turns the camera back on the viewer. He wanted to return, to admire his work, to confirm his belief that he was an invisible ghost that no one could touch. But when we look at Bryan Kohberger's file, the scariest part is the normality. He wasn't born into violence or poverty. His parents were diligent, middle-class workers who supported him. The tragedy began with invisible cracks inside the school walls. In high school, Bryan was overweight, shy. He became a target for ruthless bullying, especially the mockery from popular girls. That humiliation planted the seeds of a deep, simmering hatred for women who were beautiful and happy. To escape the role of the victim, Bryan chose the most extreme path: control. In his senior year, he lost weight frantically. He became skeletal. He developed an obsession with a strict vegan diet. He forced his parents to buy brand new pots and pans, terrified that his food might touch a trace of animal fat. Psychologists point out this wasn't about health. It was about an absolute need for control. It started with controlling calories, and his ego swelled until it mutated into the need to control life and death. The K-bar knife was simply the final tool to assert that power. This case forces us to ask a chilling question. What does a monster look like? Bryan Kohberger doesn't have horns. He doesn't have claws. He is an elite Ph.D. student. He wears a suit. He goes to class every day. He lives right next door. He could be your delivery driver, the guy at the desk next to you, or the stranger smiling at you in the elevator. Do we really know the people around us? Or are we just seeing the normal masks that they put on every morning? And don't be so quick to judge Dylan, the girl who stayed silent for 8 hours. Let's be honest with ourselves. In that moment, staring death in the face, when fear paralyzes every single nerve in your body, would you be the hero, charging into battle? Or would you freeze and pray to become invisible? We all think we are brave, until the monster is actually standing at our bedroom door. Finally, the house at 1122 King Road was called a fishbowl because of its glass doors. But look at your Facebook. Look at your Instagram. Aren't we all living in a digital fishbowl? We broadcast our locations, our schedules, our habits, for the whole world to see. Have you ever asked yourself, who is silently watching your fishbowl from the darkness? We have reached the end of this harrowing journey together. From the radiant smiles of Kaylee, Madison, Zana, and Ethan in their party house, to the deadly silence under Bryan Kohberger's blade at 4 a.m. This is not just a murder case. It is a tragedy of the modern age. A killer wearing the face of an intellectual, using academic knowledge as a weapon, driven by a warped loneliness in a world that obsessed over image. Justice has been served with a life sentence. The house has been leveled to the ground. But the ghost of King Road will linger forever in the minds of those left behind. Before we close this file, I want to hear your thoughts on two big questions. First, do you believe Bryan Kohberger was born a monster? Or is he the twisted product of an indifferent society where the bullied child eventually transforms into the hunter? Second, the verdict. 4 life sentences in exchange for his breath. Do you see this as humane mercy? Or is it a grave injustice to the families who wanted an eye for an eye? The law has its logic, and grief has its own logic. Sometimes, justice and satisfaction do not walk the same path. So where is the balance? Where is the line between punishment and revenge? I leave that answer to your own conscience. The file on the Idaho 4 ends here. Thank you for walking with extreme fear until these final seconds. Here at Extreme Fear, we are not here to play judge or jury. We are not here to decide anyone's fate. Our mission is simply to lay out the shards of the truth before your eyes, no matter how jagged or how hard they are to swallow. If you value the depth of our research and our storytelling, please hit that like button and smash that subscribe button. It is the fuel that keeps our team going to crack open even more complex cases in the future. If you have a theory or a case you want us to cover next, leave it in the comments. I read every single one. I am Abby. Have a peaceful night. And don't forget to lock your doors. Goodbye, and I'll see you in the next case.